They thought firing me would end me, but that single sentence, "You're terminated effective immediately," was the start of their downfall. 14 days later, the same man who humiliated me on stage was on his knees before investors begging for mercy. And all I said to him in the end was thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we tell true stories of betrayal, payback, and poetic justice. If you've ever been underestimated or disrespected at work, this story is your fuel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and get comfy, because my revenge took 14 days and it was worth every second. The sound that day still haunts me sometimes. Not the words, those came later, but the snap of a folder closing. Sharp, final, cold. Then, in that deadly quiet boardroom, Adrian Core said 10 words that turned my 6-year career into dust. Effective immediately, Ria Solis, you are terminated from Helix Core Labs. No anger, no emotion, just that corporate chill that makes your stomach twist. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The projector light flickered, casting data charts on the wall. A pen rolled off someone's notebook and hit the table with a small click. I sat there, staring at the man I had once helped climb his way into this company. Adrian was new as CEO. Slick suit, shiny teeth, every word polished like it came from a pitch deck. He didn't look at me directly. He spoke as if I were a problem being deleted from a spreadsheet. I had been there since the start, building the very system that made Helix Core worth over $1 billion. I'd coded pieces of that platform while eating instant noodles and sleeping on office couches during power cuts. But now, to him, I was just a name on a piece of paper. For 6 seconds, the boardroom was frozen. Then I nodded once, closed my notebook, and whispered, "Thank you." You could feel confusion move through the room like a cold wind. Even Adrian's mask slipped for half a second before he looked away. They thought I was being polite. They thought I had accepted defeat. But that thank you was the quietest work cry I've ever spoken. When I stepped out of that building for the last time, the world felt washed in gray. I watched teams walk past, avoiding my eyes. Some were friends, or used to be. Fear does that to people. No one wants to be next on the list. Outside, the winter air hit me like an open palm. I gripped my exit packet so tight my knuckles went white. Inside that folder was a check that couldn't even cover 3 months' rent. But I smiled anyway, because Adrian Core had no idea what he had just given me. He thought he'd erased me. He had, without realizing it, handed me back everything. Helix Core Labs started as a messy, chaotic dream. A small group of us working in a room barely big enough for 6 desks. I was the systems architect, the one who held the puzzle together. Our product was a modular platform that could plug into almost any corporate environment. Fast, scalable, flexible. It was the heart of Helix Core's billion-dollar empire, and the patent on that heart, the real ownership, was tricky. Years ago, during a rough patch, Helix Core cut all R&D budgets. The company was bleeding money. We were told to pause all non-essential projects. I'd spent 6 months building something I truly believed in, so I made a deal, quietly and legally. I filed for the core patent under a small independent entity I owned called Crimson Vector Systems. It was supposed to protect our work until the company stabilized. When they brought the project back in-house, I kept partial ownership. Just a clause, deep in pages of legal language no one ever reads. A clause that said, if my role as chief architect ended for any reason beyond my control, all base rights revert to me. That clause slept quietly for almost 2 years, until Adrian fired me and woke it up. Adrian came from a world of slogans, not sweat. He used words like streamline and synergy, like magic spells. He didn't understand what we built. He just wanted faster profits. The first thing he did as CEO was hold a company-wide meeting telling everyone, "We'll trim the fat." I should have known then that I was next. He didn't see value in people, only in numbers. During that meeting, he flashed a slide showing new efficiency goals, and when I pointed out the technical flaws, he smiled too politely. It's always that fake smile that comes right before the knife. He said, "Ria, I appreciate your passion, but you're thinking like an engineer, not a strategist." I wanted to tell him those strategies only worked if someone actually built them. I held back. 2 months later, my name was on the termination notice. I went home that night and sat in the dark, the city buzzing outside my window. It's strange how silence can hurt worse than shouting. I remember making tea, forgetting about it, and finding it hours later. Cold, undrunk, like I was. The humiliation replayed in my head on the loop. Every word, every look, the pitying eyes of the HR director as she handed me my severance papers, the tiny smirk on Adrian's face when I said, "Thank you." That smile, the one that said he thought he'd won, he didn't know I wasn't just an employee. I was the spine of the product, the code, the architecture, the licensing thread that tied it all together. And now every heartbeat of that system was legally mine. The next morning, I opened my old laptop and logged into the back-end license dashboard of our product, the same portal I'd built myself. I checked the agreement status. Sure enough, at the top of the screen, a quiet little message blinked. Primary license holder, Crimson Vector Systems. That was me. I didn't plan to do anything right away. Revenge isn't just about action. It's about patience. I wanted to watch what happened when they realized what they'd done. And, within days, they gave me a front row seat. Helix Core had planned a huge product demonstration for investors. Big press, live stream, smiling executives, flashy words. This was Adrian's grand performance to show how efficient the company was now under his rule. They loaded up the system, ran through the slides, cued the demo. And then, just as they hit run, everything froze. On screens across the entire auditorium, one line appeared in bold. License authorization expired. I saw the clip later online. Someone recorded the whole thing. Engineers running around, whispering, sweating. Adrian trying to keep smiling while his voice started shaking. He blamed a server glitch. But every word he spoke only made him look smaller. That glitch was the system realizing it had no valid license to operate. The license was mine, and the contract was dead the moment he fired me. I sat at home in my tiny apartment with a cup of fresh tea this time and watched. No bitterness, just a quiet satisfaction. For years, I had poured my soul into that system. If they wanted to erase me, fine, but the system itself would remember me. After the debacle, HR called me. They asked if I could come in, just temporarily, to help with a few transitions. Their tone was very polite now. I asked, "Is Adrian aware of this call?" Silence. Then a nervous laugh. They offered more money. I told them, "You don't have enough." And I meant it. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect. And they had already spent all of theirs. When I hung up, a kind of calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared of losing anything. They couldn't take anything more from me. And when fear leaves, power walks in. That night, I stood by my window, watching car lights paint the street. I thought about everything that had led here. The long nights, the compromises, the silent loyalty. It was easy to feel small when someone in a suit tries to define your worth. But I realized something important. Your worth isn't in the contract they write for you. It's in the work you create. I slept well that night. Really well. For the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. When I woke up, I had 3 new emails. One was from a journalist asking for comment on Helix Core's licensing controversy. I ignored it. The second was from a recruiter offering a senior role in a startup. I deleted it. The third, though, that one made me smile. It was from Cal Dane. Cal had been one of our best strategy analysts before leaving Helix Core a year back. He'd gone to work for Vanguard Dynamics, our biggest competitor. The subject line simply read, "Coffee?" I didn't reply right away. But I did make a pot of coffee at home and stare at that message, because I had a feeling something bigger was brewing. By the end of that week, the whole industry was talking about Helix Core's crash, but no one yet knew the truth, that the system wasn't broken. It was just mine. And the man who fired me was about to learn what real ownership meant. The next morning, when Cal's message popped up, the first thing I felt wasn't hope. It was caution. In the world of tech and contracts, everyone smiles with a knife behind their back. But this felt different. Coffee was a simple word, but it sounded like a door opening. I showered, dressed, and stood in front of my mirror a little longer than usual. The last time I'd been this calm was years ago, when I wrote the first line of code that built Helix Core. Back then, it was about creation. Now, it was about justice. I picked a quiet cafe tucked in the corner of an old street, somewhere neutral. When Cal walked in, he looked different. Older, sharper, carrying that confident calm only people with leverage have. We hugged awkwardly. We'd been on good terms before he left, but business had made everything complicated. He ordered black coffee. I took green tea. For a minute, we just sat, watching the world pass outside the glass window. Finally, he spoke. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "The demo. The crash." I nodded. I didn't confirm or deny. He smiled. "You don't have to say it. We both know whose system that was." I kept silent, stirring my tea. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Rhea, they're panicking. The investors are jumping ship. Helix Core's stock has dropped 30% in a week. Adrian's people are scrambling to rebuild the platform from scratch." I almost pitied them. Almost. "What is it you want, Cal?" I asked finally. He laughed. Straight to the point, as always. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, there was one page printed in bold at the top. "Proprietary Systems Acquisition. Offer for Crimson Vector." I blinked, scanning the numbers at the bottom. 9 zeros, a billion, and a small note, "Subject to your continued advisory role." I looked up, and he met my eyes with something between admiration and apology. "Vanguard wants to buy the rights. They know the technology is yours. They also know Helix Core can't run without it. They want to negotiate before Adrian tries something desperate." I felt my pulse in my throat, not from greed, but from the sheer disbelief that my quiet clause, written in a moment of survival years ago, had turned into this. It's a lot," I said carefully. He nodded. "It's what it's worth." That evening, after Cal left, I sat by the window again with my laptop open but untouched. My hands hovered over the keys. $1 billion. That's the kind of number that feels made up until it's in front of you. But even with that offer, I wasn't thinking about the money. I kept seeing Adrian's face, calm, smug, untouchable. The face of someone who'd once told me my communication style needed polish. What I wanted now wasn't revenge for the money. It was for every time I'd been made to feel small while I built what they took credit for. I whispered to no one, "This isn't about payback, it's about balance." The next few days stretched long. Helix Core made front-page news twice. First, for technical difficulties, then for unexpected licensing disputes. Behind that soft language, chaos was boiling. I knew how fast panic could spread through a company when the foundation shakes. I could almost feel the sleepless nights coming from that boardroom, where charts and profits were their new nightmares. Adrian, I imagined, pacing in frustration, shouting accusations. Part of me wanted to check in with someone still there, maybe an old colleague, but no. The less noise I made, the more power I held. So I waited. And waiting, I discovered, can be its own kind of satisfaction. One late Wednesday night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the area code, Helix Core headquarters. I answered with a slow, steady voice. "Rhea Salas speaking?" A pause. Then a familiar voice, tired and cracked from stress. "Rhea, it's Adrian." I took a long sip of water. "Adrian, it's late." He said quickly, "Look, things have gotten out of hand. The demo glitch spiraled. We can't deploy a fix because of, well, whatever licensing lock your system's throwing." He exhaled. His tone softened.
You were always the key, Rhea. The backbone. You know that. And maybe we both made mistakes. There it was, the voice of someone trying to crawl back from power's edge. "What are you asking?" I said. "Come back," he said, almost pleading now. "Even temporarily. Help us stabilize. We can renegotiate the old deal. I'll make sure you're paid what you're worth." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. There was a time when hearing "I need you" would have filled me with misplaced pride. Now it just sounded hollow. "Rhea," I said softly, "you can't pay me enough." He paused, but I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up, and for the first time, I truly laughed, quietly, but it came from deep inside. One call, one refusal, and the scales started to tip.
The following morning, I called my lawyer, an old friend named Geeta who had helped me file the Crimson Vector entity all those years ago. She still remembered the late-night drafting session over cheap pizza. When I told her about the Helix core collapse, she whistled. "So he actually fired you without reading the ownership clause?" "Apparently, someone skipped page 38. She burst out laughing. "Serves him right. So what do we do now?" I forwarded her the offer from Vanguard. There was a short silence before she muttered, "Rhea, this isn't just a contract. This is history. You realize that, right?" "I just want it handled cleanly," I said. "No theatrics. Just what's fair." Geeta's voice softened. "You always were the quiet storm type." That made me smile. "Storms cleared the air," I said. Over the next few days, Helix Core's house of cards kept collapsing. An email leak surfaced. Employees anonymously posted about internal blame games. A few even mentioned how Adrian had ignored early warnings from the technical team, how he cut budgets and silenced concerns to save money. Board members started resigning one by one. The news reporters circled like hungry gulls, and me? I did nothing. Not a word, not a move. Sometimes silence destroys louder than any weapon. 2 days later, Cal called again. "Rhea," he said, "Helix Core's shares dropped another 10% today. Adrian's looking for you, probably to sue, maybe beg, who knows. But our legal team reviewed everything. You're perfectly in the clear." "Then we move forward," I said. He hesitated, tone turning careful. "I know this deal isn't just business for you, but remember, once you sign, it's done. Your technology will live under Vanguard." "I know," I said. "That's exactly the point. It'll be somewhere it's valued, somewhere real work still matters." That night, I packed up my tiny apartment. It wasn't much. 2 suitcases, 1 plant I always forgot to water, a few hard drives. But it meant freedom. When you've been chained to a company's arrogance for years, walking away in light feels like flying. Still, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, memories came back. All those nights staring at screens until my eyes burned. The company parties where my name was always missing from the award slides. The countless meetings where I'd explain systems to people pretending to understand. Revenge wasn't a single act. It was all these tiny moments collecting into clarity. You can't always fight injustice with fire. Sometimes you let it burn itself out, and then you rebuild. Friday morning, I woke early, made coffee, and took a deep breath. I looked at my reflection and said quietly, "Today." I met Cal at a quiet office downtown. Geeta joined via video call. The Vanguard team walked us through the final contract. When the last signature line blinked on the tablet, I hesitated, just for a second. Cal noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I exhaled. Yes, I just never thought freedom would have a dollar sign. He smiled gently. "You earned every one of those zeros." My finger hovered over the screen for a heartbeat. Then, I signed. Crimson Vector Systems, acquired by Vanguard Dynamics. The moment was quiet. No fireworks, no grand applause. But inside, something heavy lifted from my chest. For the first time, the system belonged where it should have, under someone who respected the work. And me? I wasn't former employee anymore. I was the architect of both the system and its justice. Later that evening, I walked by Helix Core's old building.
The glass walls, once gleaming with ambition, looked tired. Inside, lights flickered. Few people remained. At the front desk, new guards stood who didn't know me. The company's bright posters were gone, replaced with empty walls. I smiled, not out of spite, but closure. That building had been my prison, my workshop, and now, its own tomb. 2 weeks. That's all it had taken. 14 days from termination to total inversion. Adrian's empire stood on foundations I built, and once I stepped away, gravity did the rest. That night, Cal called again. "Rhea," he said, "Helix Core's shares dropped another 10% today. Adrian's looking for you, probably to sue, maybe beg, who knows. But our legal team reviewed everything. You're perfectly in the clear." "Then we move forward," I said. He hesitated, tone turning careful. "I know this deal isn't just business for you, but remember, once you sign, it's done. Your technology will live under Vanguard." "I know," I said. "That's exactly the point. It'll be somewhere it's valued. Somewhere real work still matters." That night, I packed up my tiny apartment. It wasn't much. 2 suitcases, 1 plant I always forgot to water, a few hard drives. But it meant freedom. When you've been chained to a company's arrogance for years, walking away light feels like flying. Still, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, memories came back. All those nights staring at screens until my eyes burned. The company parties where my name was always missing from the award slides. The countless meetings where I'd explain systems to people pretending to understand. Revenge wasn't a single act. It was all these tiny moments collecting into clarity. You can't always fight injustice with fire. Sometimes you let it burn itself out, and then you rebuild. Friday morning, I woke early, made coffee, and took a deep breath. I looked at my reflection and said quietly, "Today." I met Cal at a quiet office downtown. Geeta joined via video call. The Vanguard team walked us through the final contract. When the last signature line blinked on the tablet, I hesitated, just for a second. Cal noticed. "You okay?" he asked. I exhaled. Yes, I just never thought freedom would have a dollar sign. He smiled gently. "You earned every one of those zeros." My finger hovered over the screen for a heartbeat. Then, I signed. Crimson Dector Systems, acquired by Vanguard Dynamics. The moment was quiet. No fireworks, no grand applause. But inside, something heavy lifted from my chest. For the first time, the system belonged where it should have, under someone who respected the work. And me? I wasn't former employee anymore. I was the architect of both the system and its justice. Later that evening, I walked by Helix Core's old building.
The glass walls, once gleaming with ambition, looked tired. Inside, lights flickered. Few people remained. At the front desk, new guards stood who didn't know me. The company's bright posters were gone, replaced by empty walls. I smiled, not out of spite, but closure. That building had been my prison, my workshop, and now its own tomb. 2 weeks. That's all it had taken. 14 days from termination to total inversion. Adrian's empire stood on foundations I built, and once I stepped away, gravity did the rest. That night, Cal called again. "Press conference tomorrow," he said. "Vanguard's announcing the acquisition publicly. Adrian will be there too, I think. The board wants a statement." "From me?" "Yes, if you're comfortable." I paused, then smiled slowly. "I think I have one last thing to say." The morning of the press conference, the city air smelled like rain and nerves. I woke before the sun, sat on the edge of my bed, and took a long, slow breath. Outside, the street was still quiet, delivery vans humming, someone walking a dog, but my heart was louder than all of it. I'd imagined this day 1,000 times, yet it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance finally snapping into place. I put on a simple dark gray suit, nothing flashy. Real power never needs to shout. On my way out, I glanced back at my small apartment one last time.
It had been my cave, my watchtower. The place where the empire I built was taken and where I took it back. Now it was just four walls. I locked the door. The press conference was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom. Rows of reporters buzzed like an impatient hive. Screens lit up with logos, Helix Corps' once bright blue emblem next to Vanguard's crimson swirl. I walked in quietly with Cal and a few Vanguard executives. People turned, cameras clicked like popping corn. At the front, under every light, stood Adrian Corr. He looked smaller than I remembered. His once perfect hair slightly grayer, his shoulders not as straight. His suit still screamed executive, but his eyes told the truth. Panic, dressed as professionalism. He gave a tiny nod when he saw me, pretending it was cordial. But I saw the flicker of recognition. The same look you give when you realize the knife you threw has come back faster than you expected. Reporters asked generic questions at first. Is this a partnership or a merger? What inspired the collaboration? Adrian answered with his usual smoothness, bending facts into marketing poetry. Helix Corps and Vanguard are aligning to drive innovation across industries, he said. I stayed silent, waiting, watching. The room buzzed with curiosity. They all wanted to hear from the mysterious architect behind the scenes. Finally, someone asked, Dr. Salas, could you clarify how you come into this equation? There's been speculation about ownership of the patent at the heart of Helix Corps' platform. The air froze. Cameras swiveled toward me. Adrian's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, but I spoke first. What I built, I said quietly but clearly, was meant to empower real creators, people who build, not just those who manage. 2 years ago, I signed a clause that made sure no one could take that away if I were ever pushed out. Murmurs spread like ripples. I continued, steady. When I was fired, that clause reactivated. The system reverted back to me. Everything that powered Helix Corps ran on that license. When they let me go, they let the heartbeat go too. A wave of shocked whispers washed over the room. Adrian stepped forward, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Rhea, I fully acknowledge your contributions, but there's no need for dramatics. We resolved this amicably. I turned my head slowly. Amicably? Do you mean when your company shut down within 2 weeks of firing me, and then had to come begging through intermediaries? The reporters gasped. Cameras flashed. He swallowed, trying to keep his face neutral. I smiled softly. It's okay. You did what you thought was smart business. Cut costs, trim the fat, streamline talent. Only sometimes, when you cut too deep, you sever the artery. That line earned a few involuntary smiles in the crowd. Even Cal's mouth twitched. Adrian's PR handler rushed forward, whispering to him. But he wasn't listening anymore. He finally faced me directly, voice low, almost pleading. You got what you wanted, Rhea. You sold the patent. You made your fortune. Why humiliate me publicly? I looked at him, not angry, not even smug. Because you already did that to me. 6 years of work dismissed in a single sentence in front of everyone for the sake of your ego. I took a step closer, lowering my microphone. This isn't humiliation, Adrian. This is education. You could hear a pin drop. Then one reporter whispered audibly, Wow. Adrian froze, his confidence dissolving.
He stepped back, mumbling something about legal proceedings, and walked off stage. The cameras followed him out like vultures tracking their next meal. After that, things moved quickly. Vanguard announced the billion-dollar deal in detail, confirming my new title as Chief Advisory Architect. They spoke about innovation, collaboration, and growth, but I barely heard any of it. All I could think about were the past 2 weeks. The humiliation, the silence, the calculation, and now the weight lifting from my shoulders. It was strange. Revenge didn't feel fiery or explosive. It felt quiet,
like the air after a storm when everything broken is finally still. After the conference ended, Cal guided me out through a side door to avoid the reporters. "I don't think anyone's going to forget that line about the artery," he said with a low laugh. I smiled faintly. "Was it too dramatic?" He shrugged. "No, honest." I liked that answer. We walked a bit down the empty hallway, then Cal turned serious. "You know, some people would have sued, or leaked documents, or gone to war." I nodded. "I didn't need war," I said. "I just needed truth." He looked at me thoughtfully. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "I build again, but on my terms." Later that evening, back home, I sat cross-legged on the floor. All my belongings were still in boxes from when I'd packed to move. I opened one box labeled Old Work, filled with notebooks, sketches, and flash drives. Each one carried a piece of my past life, ideas that never got approved, improvements that were always dismissed. I ran my fingers over a page that said, "Modular Bridge Integration, Future Prototype." A part of me smiled. Revenge might have cleared the slate, but creation was the thing that would write what came next. I worked late into the night that day, sketching new systems, not for money, not for fame, just because it made me feel alive again. Every line of code, every idea was a small act of self-respect. And after losing my voice in corporate noise for years, that self-respect felt priceless. Meanwhile, news outlets feasted on Helix Core's downfall. CEO fired architect, lost company in 2 weeks, one headline read. Another said, "The clause that destroyed a billion-dollar empire." I made coffee and read them quietly. No gloating, just closure. People online began messaging me. Some were strangers, thanking me for inspiring them to stand up at their own jobs. One message said, "You reminded me that being underestimated isn't the same as being powerless." I teared up reading that one. Power, I realized, isn't loud. It's the strength to walk away without needing to prove yourself, because your work already speaks. A few days later, Cal called again. "Guess what?" he said, amusement in his voice. "Adrian just resigned. The board accepted it this morning. They're launching an investigation into his management practices." I closed my eyes. Not from shock, more from relief. "I hope he finds something real to learn from," I said. Cal chuckled. "That might take him a few lifetimes." We both laughed, the kind that comes after a long, long storm. Over the next week, I officially began my role with Vanguard. The workspace was humble, but the atmosphere was different. Open, respectful, genuine. They didn't hire me for politics or image. They hired me because they understood what I'd built and valued how I thought. The team treated me not like a headline, but like a mentor. They listened, and when they disagreed, they challenged my ideas politely, without ego. It was fresh air after years of breathing dust. Sometimes at meetings, a young developer would nervously say, "Ma'am, is this the correct logic route?" I'd smile and say, "First rule, never call me ma'am. Second, show me your logic. Let's see it together." That spark, that shared curiosity, reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Weeks later, Vanguard launched their new campaign built around innovation and respect. The tagline, chosen by Cal's team, made me laugh when I saw it. "Integrity is the best code." The company message went viral. People quoted me online, shared my story on tech forums. Some called me a revenge genius. I didn't feel like a genius. I felt human again, like the version of myself before the endless boardrooms and polite insults. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Sometimes, revenge doesn't destroy what hurt you, it heals what was broken inside you." And I meant it. Yet, even in peace, there's memory. A part of me still remembered that boardroom, that sharp crack of a folder shutting, that final sentence. "Effective immediately, you are terminated." It used to echo like pain. Now it sounded like freedom's opening note. Because if he hadn't fired me, I'd still be there, building someone else's dream under someone else's name. His cruelty, however unintentional, was the hammer that broke my cage. And from those pieces, I built something stronger.
The subject line glowed at me like a cold stare. From Adrian Core, one final request. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the sides of my laptop, heart beating with a mix of curiosity and weariness. It had been almost 3 weeks since the press conference, 3 weeks of calm after a storm that had swallowed an empire. I was finally sleeping well, coding again, smiling without having to fake it. The last thing I wanted was another ghost from Helix Core. But I clicked, because that's what curiosity does. It opens doors even when you know what's behind them might hurt. The message was short. Ria, I know you have no reason to speak to me, but I need 5 minutes. Please, one conversation, no lawyers, no games. I'll meet wherever you choose. Adrian. No arrogance this time, no clever phrasing, just a man uncloaked. I stared at the message for a long while, then leaned back, eyes tracing the slow movement of clouds outside my window. Part of me whispered, leave it. Don't open that door again. Another part answered, sometimes closure doesn't come from silence. So I wrote back one line. Tomorrow at 10, Simple Grounds Cafe. The next morning, Simple Grounds was half empty, soft music floating overhead. I sat near the window, hands wrapped around a warm mug. When Adrian walked in, even the barista glanced up. People still recognized him. But this wasn't the same polished man who'd stood before the cameras. His suit was slightly wrinkled, hair uncombed at the edges, eyes tired and heavy. He looked human. He stood for a moment, awkward, as if unsure how to begin. Then he came over, sat down, and let out a slow breath. Thanks for seeing me, he said quietly. I figured you wouldn't rest until I did. Not unkind, just honest. He nodded, looked down at his coffee. I deserve that, he said. Then, after a pause, I've had a lot of time to think. Too much, maybe. I didn't answer yet. I wanted to hear what honesty looked like from him. He continued, voice low. When I took the role at Helix Core, I thought efficiency meant cutting what didn't look profitable. I didn't see that what looked slow was actually what kept us alive. I thought firing you proved my strength as a leader, but I see now it just proved my blindness. He rubbed his forehead, eyes glassy. I've lost everything, you know. The board, my reputation, the home, gone. And what hurts isn't the fall. It's realizing I built the fall myself. For the first time, I saw no pride in him, just fatigue. That's what I meant earlier. Revenge doesn't always need to break someone. Sometimes the truth does it better. I took a slow sip of my tea. I warned you once. Not in words, but in the way I worked. You mistook quiet for weakness. You saw humility as something to cut away. He met my eyes. And I was wrong. We sat in small silence for a while. Outside, cars rolled by, life continuing indifferent to old failures. Finally, he said, I'm starting over, consulting here and there. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. Not because I want something, because it's overdue. I let the words hang. Sorry is small, yet it sometimes reaches places punishment can't. I nodded once. Then that's enough. You don't owe me more. A faint, broken smile crossed his face. You really did win, Ria. Not just money, peace. I breathed slowly. It was never really about winning, Adrian. It was about remembering who I was before people like you told me I wasn't enough. He nodded again, quietly. Then he stood, left a few bills by his cup and said, For what it's worth, I hope you build something beautiful again. And he walked out. When the door shut behind him, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not pity, just release. For the first time, the story felt finished. That night, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, higher up, overlooking the city lights. The streets below shimmered in amber, cars traced veins of red and gold between them. My laptop sat open behind me, faint screen glow spilling across the floor. Inside was a new prototype, the next step of the modular system. Cleaner, free from corporate hands. Mine and mine alone. I thought about all the people who had been made small, like I once was. People told they were replaceable, invisible, unimportant, because they were quiet workers instead of loud sellers. And I whispered into the night, they're wrong about what power looks like. Power isn't chairing a boardroom or signing a check. It's surviving, standing back up and building again, stubbornly, quietly, beautifully. A week later, Vanguard held its official launch for the new platform under my guidance. This time, no stage lights, no theater, just developers, engineers, and designers in a well-lit hall, sharing ideas and pizza boxes. The energy was real. When I spoke, the room fell still. I said, when you build something, protect it. Not just the code or the design, but your name, your ethics, your time. Because those who rush to take credit for your work, they fade. But what you build right will outlast every boardroom. The team cheered, not as fans, but as equals. That more than anything healed years of erasure. Over the following months, we integrated the technology fully into Vanguard's systems. The new clients loved it. Investors praised it. But I kept my focus on the work itself. Each project meeting, each brainstorm felt like rewriting history correctly this time. Every once in a while, I'd still see Helix Core mentioned in the news, now a shadow of its old self. A quiet acquisition rumor, former employees scattering to new jobs. Adrian? No one really knew where he went, and that was fine. Some stories don't need sequels. What mattered was what came next. 6 months after the press conference, Vanguard arranged a celebratory dinner for the team. Midnight came. Laughter echoed, stories flowed. When it ended, Cal walked me out to the parking lot. He said, "You know, every company in the sector is still telling your story? The one about how a single clause toppled an empire?" I chuckled. "Good. Maybe some of them will finally read the fine print." Then I added more softly, "But if they only remember the contract part, they'll miss the real point." Cal raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "That you can't fire the person who is the foundation," I said. "If you try, you pull the whole building down." Cal smiled, shaking his head. "You really should write a book." "Maybe, after I finish this next project." We said goodnight, and as I drove home, I realized I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about beginnings. That night at home, I sat at my desk and opened one of my old notebooks, one before the chaos, filled with sketches and dreams. On the first page, in faded ink, I had once written, "One day I'll build something that can't be taken away." I smiled, closed the notebook gently, and whispered, "Done." What Helix Core taught me is something I wish I could tell every worker, every creator, every quiet thinker staying late after everyone else has gone home. Your worth isn't measured by how loudly someone praises you or how long your name stays on a door. It's written in the things that keep running when no one's watching. When someone tries to erase you, remember you're still the author of your story. They can take your title, your desk, your badge, but never your blueprint. The work you've built, the lessons you've learned, those go with you. And sometimes, when the time is right, your quiet skill becomes the loudest revenge. So if you've ever been fired, overlooked, or underestimated, know this. Sometimes losing that job is exactly what sets you free to build something greater. Sometimes the greatest thank you you can ever say is the one you whisper on your way out the door. Thanks for listening to this story of quiet revenge and ultimate freedom. If you've ever turned pain into purpose, hit that like button. Let others know they can too. Subscribe for more true stories where power shifts back to those who earned it. And remember, they might write the headline, but you write the legacy.